The hum of the engines filled the cabin of JAT Flight 367 as the plane cruised smoothly at 33,000 feet. It was January 26, 1972, and Vesna Vulovic, a 22-year-old flight attendant, was making her way down the narrow aisle, checking on passengers. She had only been with the airline for a short time, her youthful enthusiasm still apparent as she worked. The aircraft, a McDonnell Douglas DC-9, had taken off from Copenhagen, bound for Belgrade with a stop in Zagreb. The atmosphere inside the plane was calm, routine, until it wasn't. A sudden explosion ripped through the fuselage, splitting the plane apart mid-air. Passengers, luggage, and metal debris were violently ejected into the sky. In an instant, Vesna found herself tumbling through the open air, her body sucked out as the aircraft disintegrated around her. The sound of rushing wind screamed in her ears, the world spinning in an unfathomable blur of sky and earth. The icy air burned her skin, and the force of the fall made it impossible to control her descent. The horror of free-falling from such an impossible height was incomprehensible, but then, darkness. She did not witness the remainder of her fall. The tail section of the aircraft, where she had been, had broken off and plummeted towards the ground, hitting a thickly forested area in Czechoslovakia. When rescuers arrived, they did not expect to find survivors. The wreckage was a scene of devastation, twisted metal and scattered remains littering the snowy terrain. The silence of the wreckage was eerie, punctuated only by the howling winter wind. But as they moved through the debris, a faint moan caught their attention. Among the shattered remains of the plane, they discovered Vesna, barely clinging to life. She had suffered a fractured skull, broken vertebrae, and multiple other injuries, yet somehow, against every conceivable odd, she had survived. It was nothing short of a miracle. The explosion, the ejection from the aircraft, the sheer force of the impact, none of it had killed her. Some would call it divine intervention, others sought scientific reasoning. It was believed that the section of the plane she had been in had plummeted in a way that the impact was somewhat cushioned by trees and a thick layer of snow. Additionally, experts suggested that her immediate unconsciousness had kept her body limp, preventing muscle tension that would have made injuries even worse. But even with these factors, her survival was beyond comprehension. In the hospital, as the days passed, Vesna drifted in and out of consciousness. The medical staff did everything they could to stabilize her, treating her extensive injuries and monitoring her fragile state. They were astounded by her resilience. When she finally woke, she had no memory of the crash. She only knew she was in pain, surrounded by unfamiliar faces in an unfamiliar place. The news of her survival spread across the world, making her an instant legend. The Guinness World Records listed her as the person who survived the highest fall without a parachute. Reporters sought her out, desperate to hear her story, but Vesna herself remained humble. She had not even wanted to be on that flight, her schedule had been mistaken for another Vesna's, an accident of fate that had placed her on the doomed aircraft. As the weeks turned to months, she faced an arduous recovery. Walking again seemed like an impossible dream, but she was determined. With rehabilitation, she slowly regained movement, defying medical expectations. Despite the trauma her body had endured, she eventually stood, then took her first steps. Her resilience was extraordinary. Even though she was never able to resume her career as a flight attendant due to the injuries she sustained, she found new purpose in life. The official cause of the explosion was never definitively determined, though authorities believed it to be a terrorist attack. Croatian nationalists had claimed responsibility for a bomb placed in the luggage compartment, but no one was ever brought to justice. The mystery surrounding the incident only added to the intrigue of Vesna's survival. To this day, the details of the attack remain clouded in uncertainty, making her ordeal all the more mysterious. For the rest of her life, she remained a reluctant icon, not dwelling on the tragedy but rather on the second chance she had been given. She returned to a relatively quiet life in Serbia, though her name remained etched in history as the woman who fell 33,000 feet and lived to tell the tale. She was never entirely comfortable with the attention, and despite her fame, she never sought to capitalize on her story. She lived simply, always grateful for the opportunity to experience life in a way few others could understand. Even in her later years, the impact of her miraculous survival never left her. Though she would face health complications stemming from her injuries, she remained a symbol of human resilience and the unpredictable nature of fate. Vesna Vulović's story is not just one of survival, but of endurance, of the unbreakable human spirit, and of the fine line between life and death. Her name, and her impossible fall, remain forever in the annals of history. As time went on, she became somewhat of a quiet celebrity, receiving invitations to speak at events and granting occasional interviews. But she never sought fame. She spoke about her gratitude for life, about her belief that survival was simply her destiny, and about her hope that others would see her story as an inspiration rather than a spectacle. Even in her old age, she continued to live modestly, often reminiscing about the event that had defined her life but never allowing it to consume her. She never took a flight again, though she harbored no bitterness toward aviation. It had given her a career, a sense of purpose, and, in the end, an extraordinary tale of survival that few could ever match. When she passed away in 2016, the world mourned her loss, but her story remained, indelibly etched into history. The woman who defied the odds, the woman who fell from the sky and lived, would always be remembered as a symbol of resilience, fate, and the incredible power of the human will to survive.